How you doing, good people? This is Dave Bit Animal. Okay, so I had an interesting conversation with a guy yesterday that actually led me to do this post a little earlier than I wanted to. But I feel like, with the pending release of the Neo Geo X, that it may be the right time to go on ahead and talk about the history behind the Neo Geo. Now, technically, it wasn't a 16-bit console, but it was a big part of that console generation and the console war because a lot of Neo Geo titles, well, we'll get to it. Well, to get the history of the Neo Geo, you have to know about the company that produced the Neo Geo, which is SNK. Now, SNK, as you know from the summer of 8-bit, they produced a lot of really, really good titles for the NES. And they cut their teeth, though, in the arcades. A lot of those NES titles were arcade ports. The arcade ports they're most known, well, the arcade titles they're most known for are Akari Warriors, Alpha Mission, Baseball Stars, what else? POW, TNK3, Psycho Soldier, which is still one of my favorite SNK titles, and Vanguard, another one. Well, SNK going into the 90s, they were faced with a conundrum because they wanted to compete with Capcom, Konami, and other arcade producers. They wanted to put out games that were just as good as those companies or better. And they also wanted to compete on their own terms with Nintendo and Sega in the home console wars. So they had an innovative idea. Produce an arcade architecture that would work in conjunction with their home architecture. Hence the creation of the Neo Geo. Now, initially the Neo Geo came in two flavors. The arcade cabinets, which were called the Neo Geo MVS or multi-video system, and the Neo Geo AES or Advanced Entertainment System. Those are the arcade console and the home console, respectively. The Neo Geo had a really interesting feature in both the arcade and home consoles. The arcade consoles were called the MVS because they featured a cartridge system, which means that the arcade owners, if they wanted to change out a game, didn't have to buy an expensive conversion kit or an all new cabinet. All they had to do was buy a cartridge that came with the marquee board, that came with the marquee information. Pop open the cabinet, and behind the coin box were cartridge slots. Pop out one cartridge, pop in another cartridge, change out the marquee literature. There you go, you got a whole new game. And you still have that older cartridge if you want to go back to that game later. This actually extended the life of the Neo Geo because arcade operators were able to cheaply replace games. As far as the home console, not so much. The home console had arcade perfect everything, down to the control. The Neo Geo controller is probably one of the most beloved home console controllers ever. And that's because it was legitimately the same thing as the arcade stick. SNK made the cartridges for the home console just a little different from the arcade cartridges, just to make it easier to distinguish between the two, and it kept the arcade owners from buying home carts and just slapping them in their consoles. Now, the Neo Geo, price tag wise, for the home console was pretty expensive. A little too expensive for kids to convince their parents to buy in most instances. A Neo Geo when they came out ran about $649.99. The games upwards of about $200, and that was the going rate pretty much for the life of the system, and that turned a lot of gamers off from buying the Neo Geo because who could justify that? And what stores were selling Neo Geo games at this point? They were pretty much impossible to find games for. And so while the home console died off in America easily and pretty quickly, the arcade cabinets continued to pump out. They continued to pump out these arcade cabinets. And so the Neo Geo ended up lasting for 13 years. I think the last Neo Geo 8 MVS game was created and was published in 2002, 2003, something like that. These games, they featured phenomenal graphics, voice, great sound quality, and tight control. And this actually led to another thing that Neo Geo was known for: fighting games. With the release of Street Fighter 2 from Capcom, SNK wanted to compete, so they released Fatal Fury. Then they released World Heroes, Art of Fighting, Samurai Showdown. It goes on and on from there. The Neo Geo is also the first console to feature a game with a team battle theme, King of the Fighters 94. That series actually still continues to this day. Neo Geo, in addition to their huge backlog of fighting games, also had a great selection of sports titles like Baseball Stars, Super Baseball 2020, Neo Turf Masters, the Super Sidekicks series. They even had a pretty decent wrestling title in 3 Count Bout. And as well, in addition to those titles, there was also a great selection of shoot 'em ups on the console, like Aero Fighters, Alpha Mission 2, Pulse Star, Blazing Star, Last Resort, Viewpoint, Prehistoric Isles, which is one of my favorite games on the Neo Geo. A lot of great side scrollers like Top Hunter, Magician Lord, Blues Journey, Spin Masters. The hits just kept on coming for SNK, and their games were incredible, but they couldn't overcome that price point for the home console. And so the Neo Geo, it went away. It outlived, the MVS actually contributed to the fact that the Neo Geo outlived its 16-bit competition, its 32-bit competition, and its 64-bit competition. So, the Neo Geo survived roughly 2.5 console generations with just that arcade architecture, leading the way. Now, after the death of the Neo Geo, you see this revival of the Neo Geo in a sense because SNK, in conjunction with Tomo, is releasing Neo Geo X, which is a handheld and a docking station for the handheld that'll allow you to play on your TV. You also see a lot of compilations coming out with these Neo Geo games on them. You're also seeing through the download services, XBLA, WiiWare, Virtual Console, PlayStation Network. You see a lot of these games reviving themselves and being around longer and longer. A lot of the Neo Geo backlog is full of replay value. It's a great console. It was a great console and still is. A lot of the games hold up incredibly well today. If you can find a Neo Geo somewhere and you would rather the actual console to to getting the Neo Geo X, get one, man. It's a great system. I heartily recommend it. This has been the 8-Bit Animal, and I will catch you beautiful people tomorrow.